Hi and welcome everyone. As we get started, we're just getting rolling a few minutes after the 1 o'clock Eastern time stop. So thank you for joining us. We'll give everyone a few minutes to get logged in. Perfect. So welcome everyone as we get started. My name is David Singh. I'm a partner here at CSPN and excited for, I think this is actually our first webinar of the year. We've had a few snowstorms here in Toronto where I live and are getting through our January blues en route to February. So excited for this to be our first webinar of the year. We've got a few more coming up later this week and into the month of February, but excited to get our series started. And who better than our very own Rachel Lane, a director at and senior solutions principal within Medallia's contact center practice. And Rachel's joined us before as we launched our State of the Contact Center survey about this time last year, but sort of mid-March. We were doing the survey, was in flight last year. And we are excited to have Rachel back and talking a little bit of the extension of that that survey and some of the results that we saw, and really about how do we take some of those actions and how do we empower frontline folks within our contact centers. And I think it's not necessarily just contact centers. We can say beyond that in terms of some of our frontline service centers as well. And lots of good conversation that we'll look forward to having today in a sort of a depending on where you're calling in from, maybe it's a lunch and learn, maybe it's a mid-afternoon learn, maybe it's a mid-morning learn. And I think, Rachel, for your sake, I think it might be a mid-evening learn as you're joining us from the UK. So with that, I'd like to welcome Rachel and thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks so much. It's a great pleasure to be here. And yes, I'm in London, so it's tea time today.
Very good. Well, this is the nature of, I think, 2022, people will continue to be remote and around the world. So it's great to have you with us. I know you joined us last spring. And so maybe for those who weren't able to participate in that webinar, to give us a quick overview, Rachel, of your path that brought you through to the seat that you sit at within Medallia, and just to give people a little bit more context as to your journey.
Yeah, thank you. Well, David, I've been working in the customer, user, and employee experience field now for 16 years. And every now and again, I look back at that 16 years and you can see clear points of change, of inference across both my journey, but across obviously the environment that we're all working in, and nothing as dramatic as what we've seen over the last few years. But I pretty much worked around the spectrum from growing CX software companies and in the startup world back in the end of the 1990s and through to the early 2000s. And then as an embedded consultant working across Europe, Middle East and Africa within the contact center world and on large scale MPS programs. For the last 10 years, I've probably been doing the job of my dreams, working directly with customers, looking at end challenges, looking obviously from a technical perspective, what types of solutions do they need to meet these challenges, but also doing it with an understanding of what can the business sustain in terms of technology, but process behind that as well. What are the processes that we're able to change? What are the automations that we're able to create going forward? And as I said, nothing as dramatic as what we've been through over the last few years. But, for people like us that are, in the trenches of CX, we're truly seeing some amazing things right now. So yeah, since we talked last spring, I think we've seen those new ideas now become business as usual. There's a real proactive shift in contact centers to be more agile in the way that they make decisions. And I think people are thinking more holistically about their programs going forward. They're thinking more deeply about CX. They're thinking about the employee experience as well, and bringing those two together. So, you know, it's been a real time for change for us, and I think it's opened, not only has it opened budgets for contact centers that had been desperately needing it for years and years, but in terms of our ability and our confidence now in serving customers better, we're in so much of a better place today than we were before the pandemic, I think.
I totally agree. And I think that pace of change is something that's been exhausting for a lot of contact center leaders. And I think people were looking for that break. But when you think about all the changes that were happening everywhere, from new iOS changes that drove impacts to how organizations were onboarding and bringing on new digital customers, all the way through to the changes of lockdowns and how that changed commerce models, the global power or the global supply chain challenges that have driven more and more questions and customer interactions. It's been an exhausting year, but I think you're right in terms of being able to see the pace at which things have been able to change has been great, and it's showing that it's possible to do that, and also, to your point, attracting some of those dollars and energy in there from that perspective. As we think about, I know we're going to go through today. We've got some chance for some questions throughout. We're gonna sort of use this more as a Q&A style conversation. We've all got a few polls to ask the audience as we get through this. So with that, I want to just get your thoughts on when we look back since the last 6 to 8 months since we last spoke, some of the trends that you've seen evolving or moving away from in regards to how organizations are listening to and supporting their customers as they look to serve them.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just take a step back behind trends for a second, because we talk a lot about trends, particularly technology vendors talk a lot about trends. But behind the trends, obviously, there's challenges. And ultimately, what we're talking about here is solving customer challenges. I see 4 key buckets that are top of mind, certainly for my customers right now, and I think generally out there, and some of them have been priorities and challenges prior to the pandemic. Some of them, the focus on them now is laser sharp because of the pandemic. So let's start here with optimizing digital and self-service. I mean, there was barely a conversation to be had that didn't involve the word transformation, or digital transformation, over the last 5 years. But I think when we're thinking about that now and how we optimize digital, we're thinking much more about automation. We're thinking, how can we enable our customers to serve themselves? And the reason that we're thinking like that is because we've analyzed customer experience over years and years and years, and ultimately the large majority of them, that's how they want to serve themselves. They want things to be, you know, the path of least resistance, and self-serve for them, you know, if they can get it right, is a very quick way of navigating that relationship with your brand or your business. So that is a huge challenge, and that's driving trends in terms of technology, in deep analysis of those digital journeys, engaging digitally in the moment whilst the customers are in that website, or whether they're in the app, and across any device that they're working on. How are we able to engage with those customers in that moment in truth? How can we identify behavior that's telling us this is a customer that's looking for something and she's got a problem within her journey, and how can we make this right? What we're talking about ultimately, if you're in the contact center world, is containment, digital containment, enabling the customers to serve themselves. So that, you know, 35% of customers are talking about that, but they're talking in it less of a, you know, let's digitize our offering, but more of a, actually, how can we engage within that digital estate in a way that makes sense for my customer, and actually creates a greater relationship with those customers. So optimizing that is key right now. Analytics and automation, you know, we've been talking about analytics for years, haven't we? But automation now is really coming to the fore, because what we're able to do, if we think about things like AI, machine learning, that enables us to separate simple and complex customer engagements. And if we're able to do that, if we can identify those simple engagements, then there's a strong opportunity for us to automate some of that. That saves the business money and also will make that experience better for the customer. Analytics is key because we're all into operational improvement. We all want to know, how can we do better with less? Obviously, and analytics is a great way of showing that. And now we're moving that analytics on a stage further. You know, perhaps a few years ago, we were talking about analytics to help us de-silo data across our organization. Now we've moved a step further and we're talking about predictive analytics. How can I get ahead of my customers? How can I create segments or cohorts of customers that have been on a similar journey and understand actually what are the business metrics of this whole group, whether they have or whether they haven't engaged with me? And predictive analytics and synthetic NPS is going to be huge going forward. So that's certainly a challenge that's driving a trend out there. And the third one is, you know, I'm talking about this. I've just come off a call now, David, actually talking about enabling frontline quality. And the reason why this has really pushed up, and we've always been interested, obviously, in enabling frontline quality, performance management and coaching. But now where we're looking at potentially 50% and sometimes more of our employees working remotely, it's critical. And as we also, on top of that, compound this, we have high levels of attrition, higher than ever levels of attrition. So how do we recruit remotely, onboard remotely, and empower and coach them through to be experts in their field? That really takes a considerable amount of effort and on the front end of that, obviously, good technology to really enable us to see what are the key topics that we need to be training our workforce on today that is going to really positively impact those customer journeys. And then the fourth area, omnichannel. And we have been talking about omnichannel for a good while now. We've been talking about those seamless experiences. But when I talk about omnichannel, I'm talking about having an experience across each channel that is the same, and each channel can offer me the ability to engage and get the same results. I'll give you a very quick example of that is, you know, I often find that if I choose chat as my preferred channel, it takes me longer than if I call into the contact center. And one of the reasons for that might be that there's simultaneous sessions. I'm normally waiting for that agent to get back to me. So when I'm talking about omnichannel, I'm talking about the same product, the same service experience for those customers. So I still think we have a long way to go. But of course, in the main, when we're talking omnichannel, we're talking about understanding data across those channels, understanding where the service fallout was in that customer journey. So there's a lot there, David, isn't there? And some of these are new, but some of these are bringing the challenges that are coming to the fore now are more critical perhaps than they've been previously.
Yeah, I think it's the way you describe these trends. I couldn't agree more with them. And I think I was thinking, as we're leading up to this, and we use this example with another client, and it was 2 years ago, I got an electronic toothbrush for Christmas. And I share this in the sense of thinking about old habits and changing habits. And I thought I was always brushing my teeth, and I brush them 2-3 times, sometimes 4 times a day, because I just like to brush my teeth. I'm a weird guy like that. Anyways, it turned out with the right technology, I realized I was not brushing for 2 minutes every time. You know, it's the same reason as when you think about washing your hands, you sing happy birthday. We're all used to that now in the middle of the pandemic of getting into new habits. But I think it's being able to use these technologies to be able to reflect back on our past practices, and I think about, to your point of sort of enabling the quality of the front line, is our past practices. If we used to be able to walk by someone and give them a high five, or yeah, I hear what you're doing, and I want to, that was our engagement of management, to be able to say support them, and we're helping out. We listen in when we hear a little bit of tone and change on the floor. Well, we don't have that ability anymore, and we need to step in a bit further. So let's not try and just replace what we were doing before, but let's try and step ahead on some of these practices. So I think it's being able to use these tools and technologies. And again, the analytics is not just thinking about how do I get a glossier version of something, but how do I use it to make better decisions. So I'd be curious. I know we've got, I believe on the next popping over, we've got maybe to ask the audience here on a poll. If you think we're ready for that, we can go to the next one. And I think, Bonnie, if I can get you to open up the poll, that would be great. And I'd ask folks, hopefully everyone's able to see the poll of what is the number one priority from your organization on these 4 trends that Rachel just so eloquently described. So I see some of the answers coming back in. So we'll just give it a few more, 10 more seconds as people try to find their screens. Where are they listening to and watching, and get that poll answer in. So we're just at about 60-ish% of the vote. See if we can get to 75, and then maybe we call it there.
Pretty good.
Yep.
Bunch today.
So I'm not sure, Rachel, are you able to see that answer right now, that as they're coming back in on your screen?
I'm not, no, I
Okay.
can only poll itself at the minute.
Great. Okay, so I'm gonna, for the sake of, I know we've still got some folks coming in, but I'm gonna end the poll, and just in case I press the wrong button here. Oh, there we go. So there's, we can share the results, I think, to the group here, and let me do that.
Now I've got it.
Perfect. So as you can see, as we look into this, enabling frontline quality, as we're talking about, is sort of the top priority for this group, followed by that optimizing that digital and self-service, and then moving into analytics, and then omni-channel. I know that's slightly different. Just looking back at the trend on the numbers there, I think directionally slightly off on yours, but I think just from your perspective, I know this your trend might have been a little bit. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And, honestly, I'm really pleased to see that we've got 50% on the frontline quality. Certainly, the conversations that I've been having over the last 4 weeks have been very quality centric. So I'm not at all surprised to see that. And, that I do think, obviously, every time I ask this poll, because I do quite a few webinars and customer get-togethers, it has some variation, but I think the point is that there is a real focus on frontline quality. It's a wide subject. It doesn't only belong to QA teams now, it belongs to everybody in the business. Yep. And because of that, we are seeing, not even a doubling of budget going into this, probably a trebling, and some places there's a quadrupling of the amount of budget that's going into quality, because it's so critical to make sure that we keep the employees that we have, that we train them well to the point that we feel comfortable with giving them plenty of empowerment. So it applies to every organization equally. And I think those that weren't really that didn't have a full QA team in their contact center are now on board. So I think that's good news.
Absolutely. And I think the idea of again, the QA for compliance versus QA for quality, I think is really the I think so. There's a question of we can definitely share some of these results to the question that came in from there. And the results actually tee up our next sort of question area for you, Rachel, is really about, in the last, from an agent perspective, what have you seen as some of the leading examples on how organizations are helping to support agents and to best support their customers? So how do we support the agents to support the customers from the areas that you've been seeing?
Perfect. There we go. So, and this is something that, you know, again, we're keeping a very close eye on this, because as a technology vendor, it's important for us to stay ahead of our customers. But when we look at, you know, what businesses are employing to improve agent retention, we're seeing, you know, that they are looking to support more flexible working, that they are, you know, prioritizing improving training and coaching, and, you know, also increasing team building and those types of things as well, and improving contact center tools and systems. So all of these things, obviously, as a tech vendor in this space, it's in, you know, it's within, it's very important for us to be on the front end of this. But in terms of, you know, the customers that we're talking to and the success that they are having with this, that's something that we're working very closely with our customers on this. So, for example, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a real rush for organizations to not just bring in customer experience data as they had been for, you know, years previous, but also we were seeing two other trends coming alongside that. So we were starting to use employee in the business. When we're thinking about employee experience, we seem to be moving now to more of a pulse way of bringing in those employee points. And what we're able to do with that is to get on the front end of the customer. So employees are giving us their feedback on things that are, you know, both an irritant to them in terms of the way that they're serving their customers, but also they can give us great ideas for shortcuts. So we're looking at not just having that CX data coming through, we're also having employees that are giving ideas. So they're creating ideas programs that are flowing through the business. And that helps that agility that I was talking about earlier. So whereas we always say the customer is at the heart of our business, and absolutely they are, but sometimes a very, very quick way of understanding in such a fast moving environment that we've been in over the last 18 months, sometimes the fastest way to bring that into the business is by asking employees, you know, what are customers telling you? What are they not comfortable with right now? What are they struggling with that we could serve them better in a different way? So employees are, those frontline agents are being really critical for us because they're managing that day to day that they always have done, and we continue to support them doing that. But they're also getting a lot of empowerment from organizations to help them, whether it's coming out of the pandemic, whether it's restructuring their business to more of an online approach. We've got lots of examples of organizations that are really utilizing technology solutions in a way to help them pivot and become more agile in terms of how they serve their customers. You know, we talked about quality just a minute ago, and really understanding what are the key things that that frontline agent needs at any given point. And when they're working remotely, it's much more difficult than when actually you can see their faces within the contact center. They have team leaders and supervisors that they're able to call over. So we are seeing lots of great stories across the board of the new way of communicating with teams, and the new way that those team leaders and supervisors are managing those teams. And you know, we're seeing lots of new things, such as how they incentivize, and such as also when they're bringing in surveys for those frontline agents, when they get great comments from customers, how do we you know, bring those comments back into the business and use those as teachable moments? So there's lots of great stories about that, I think more so than we've ever had before, because businesses are really building around those frontline agents. They're building models that are sustainable, and they're able to take a very team-led approach to that.
Absolutely, and I think and all those, agree with all those things. And I think that to me, if the takeaway on that last slide was really around for the leaders that are listening in on this call, is there's a lot of action you can and should be taking, and that the do nothing part at the beginning is very few. You're not you're not amongst peers if you're in that category. And I wouldn't suggest the people who are listening are from there. So in the spirit of time, we'll keep moving on, which is great. And my next question was sort of around for many areas around North America. People have been working from home, and this is one of the areas that we'll be spending some time at CSPN within our community over the next years. What does it mean to live and work remotely and in different hybrid work environments? What's working and not working from your perspective in some of the areas that you've seen?
Yeah, so we can see it in terms of that workforce model and what we're expecting to do going forward. And certainly we can see here we've got 39% of those organizations are hybrid by task. So agents will come into the office for certain tasks, whether that's training. Training is the most typical one, but obviously onboarding. There will be certain reasons that agents will come in, but for the rest of the time they will work remotely. And then 15%, just 15.3% here were primarily remote with no restrictions. So there really are those agents are spending most of their time working remotely or flexibly from any of those relations. And then we've got that 16% hybrid by role as well, so time spent in office versus remote. So we are seeing a real mix, but there's like 3 or 4 categories that are really pushing forward, and I think this is it for us now. And I think we're going to expect those top 4 that we're looking at there, we're going to just expect to see those expanding further. And the great thing about this, David, that it gives us opportunity. It gives us opportunity to really have, when we're thinking about how we man our contact centers, how we create ultimate productivity in those contact centers, having the right people in the right seats at the right time. Ultimately, there's going to be an opportunity on the back end of that, because we're going to start to see some new practices coming forward. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But as difficult as it still feels right now, where we're hiring and onboarding remotely, many organizations are, I think, once we've really nailed the processes behind that, and that becomes business as usual over the next 12 months, then we're going to see where that opportunity lies for us going forward.
Totally agree. I think this is a great snapshot, and I think it'd be great to ask the group from some of those folks on our next one is, how are people currently structuring their teams to think about this? So we've got our next poll, Bonnie, if we can open that up, or Jill, that would be great. And so this poll's open for those to listen in and sort of what's happening for the group. So as people are responding, I think it's again thinking about those supporting activities, both from the recruitment perspective, the coaching perspective, and at the end, the one-on-one conversations. I think there are new ways to be doing that, and I would sort of challenge and welcome people to do that. And that's one of the themes we'll be having throughout the year, is engaging with the community, saying, what are some of those tactics that people are doing in terms of, is it morning huddles? Is it changing with different themes throughout the week or the months, in terms of both from a knowledge sharing and a content, or just a get to know each other perspective from that perspective, and how are we building a culture? So why don't we end that poll there? It seems we've got a good, almost hit that sort of 70% mark, which is usually a good sweet spot for responses there. And I'm just going to share the results so people can see that. So again, I think this is that hybrid, the primarily remote right now, which I think we've got a fairly Canadian focus, which there's different lockdown models across Canada, and it's different around the world. But again, I think the hybrid is the interesting thing to see popping out of that next, and I think that will be there to continue. And I like that idea of hybrid by task. I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah, I do, and that's bang on for me, really, in terms of that 49% primarily remote. And we will see this continue to shake out over the next 12 months. And I think when we start to get to that point where businesses are business as usual with their chosen method, and they really start to be able to optimize their contact center for productivity, then I think we're going to see the hybrid or the on-site, that number is going to move more towards hybrid, because I think, you know, we're all ultimately we're going to see a gig economy emerge out of this.
Yep.
I'm certain of it.
Absolutely. So then, as we look out to the balance of the year, and if I'll ask for two, and if you've got that, that's great. Or if you've got other, but two predictions or two wishes that you'd like to see, and what would they be and why as we look into the new year?
Yes, I have. So, and I just, you know, I can't help talking about the gig economy, can I? But I do, you know, we don't hear enough about it yet, and I think we will do. So in my predictions piece, I'm going to have for my two items, the first one, the gig economy, the second one, frontline ownership. So when we're thinking about the gig economy, how does that work? Well, if we look at what we have at the minute, and let's say we've got 2,000 agents, and prior to the pandemic, all 2,000 were on site. Now we're looking at, let's say we've got 50% of those that are now working remotely. And we need to throw into this equation that we're probably around a 50% attrition rate, you know.
Rachel, I'm just going to interrupt you for one quick second. I know we're still on the poll view for the slides. I'm not sure if you're wanting to be on your predictions slide.
Let's have a look. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Perfect. There we go. Great.
Yeah. So when we're thinking about the gig economy and the ultimate opportunity that it presents, and we're looking at, you know, those frontline agents that we have, I do believe that we are going to see less full-time equivalent and more part-timers. So we will be using the same hours, but we will have both a wider pool to pull from because we're working remotely. So we don't have to worry about, you know, the travel restrictions. When we're thinking about having the right people in the right seats at the right time, if we have a wider pool of people to choose from, we should really be able to much better cater for those peaks in call volumes. I hope and pray, and I should probably add this into my wishes as well, David, that we can see the end of when we ring into the contact center and somebody says, we have extremely high call volumes this evening. Well, because, you know, everybody has high call volumes practically every time I ring a contact center. So what I'm really hoping for from the gig economy, and I know it's a lot of work in order to really make this work, particularly in the larger contact centers, is, and it's the frontline agents that are going to drive this. I don't anticipate that the contact centers necessarily will be driving it, but certainly in Europe, we're already seeing a huge demand for 4-day weeks. Where there's a 4-day week, that, you know, that gives a day for that person to either do something different or not work at all, of course. But what we're seeing is that, you know, that work-life balance has changed, the values of those frontline agents have changed, and we're certainly going to see that actually, whilst they really love doing the job that they've been doing for a number of years, you know, they'd really like to get some benefits from working from company B. So actually, if I could just do 3 days here and 2 days over there, that would work really well for me. In addition to that, we're going to see the whole new pool coming in from students, for example. So that means that we have, again, a much bigger pool to draw from. Ultimately, that's going to enable us to really manage those peaks and troughs much better. We can then create the expert model in the contact center that is being so successful right now. So I think that's one of the key predictions that I'll have. In terms of frontline ownership, what I mean by that is we get to that point of those frontline agents where actually they're really well coached and they're able to see their own dashboards. They're able to see any customer comments that have been coming through as they're coming through, and they can self-train. And when they do that, and when they achieve certain training awards, then they're rewarded for that, whether that's in terms of salary or whether that's in terms of other incentives. And that's the point that the agent self-trains because it's in their interest to. So they become an empowered expert within that organization. So a couple of predictions there. And in terms of wishes, my number one wish, David, is true omnichannel. And I gave a nod to it earlier when I talked a little bit about chat. And I can expand on that. When I think about true omnichannel and the way that I like to engage with businesses and the analysis that we're seeing coming through is you want to take the path of least resistance to solve a challenge. And certain channels are really, digital is terrific for self-service, as we said earlier, an extension of that. Live chat, again, terrific, and it's seen huge volume increases over the last 18 months. However, it's still not a level playing field when you go into that live chat session. Ultimately that those agents are running simultaneous sessions, and I know that my live chat session is going to take me much longer because I'm sitting behind the agent who is serving other people. So my wish is that we treat every channel equally. So if I want to cancel my account, I can cancel it in chat. And there's very few organizations today that let customers cancel their account in chat. It's almost always a redirect into the contact center because they want to put you into retention. They want to convince you to stay and all of that good stuff. So I understand it, but it's not customer friendly. So true omnichannel, that's what I'm going to have as my number one wish, David.
I like it. I think I couldn't agree more also on the gig economy. And I think it's one of those things of, there used to be a resistance to it of that. And if you're not fully adopting it, if you're not optimizing for that, and it sort of goes, you're gonna have to spend more on training. You're gonna have to spend more on onboarding. You have to spend more on coaching those folks who are gonna keep you maybe on your toes a little bit more. But there's benefits beside that. And then the pushing for that expectation, because that's how we would want to be served as well. I totally hear you in terms of being able to, let's just put ourselves in the customer's shoes and use that empathy to be able to drive our advancement in technology from that perspective. Fantastic. Well, Rachel, it's always a pleasure to be able to get a chance to chat with you. And I know leading up to these and you've just got such a unique perspective across so many different customers for where Medallia sits in the many service offerings you provide to your customers, and listening to customers, but also helping organizations listen to their employees to better serve their customers. I think you guys are right in a great sweet spot to be able to share some insights. So as we wrap up today, I wanted to say thank you very much for the time today to be able to have a chat and kick off our 2022 year. As we start to look forward to the upcoming year, we've got a number of events, and I'll give a spoiler alert that we're looking to do an in-person session in late May for those within our community in the Toronto area, and we'll continue to do hybrid and remote sessions as we build our community across the country. As we continue to be in Canada, we're definitely supporting our US partners as well. We've got a number of folks in the US on our calls today. So as we wrap up, Rachel, thank you very much. Any parting last words of wisdom for the group before we wrap up today?
I think we'll continue to be brave and think agile.
Absolutely. Well said. So thank you very much for those who were able to listen in. I know we went a little bit over time, which is great, and that's what good conversations do. We'll have a recording of this on our website, and we'll send out some of the links via email after the conversation. So thank you very much, Rachel, and thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Take care.